Just to welcome everyone so long to the book launch that we're hosting today. We're waiting one more minute for people to sign up. I see people are joining us as we're going, and giving you all a warm welcome across the world, and very excited for being here with you today, and also for sharing this moment with you. I think for many of us who've been working hard on this book, we've been dreaming of this moment, but we never thought it will actually be real, and now it is, and it's hard to believe. So I think we're gonna just give it half a minute, and then we'll start. But welcoming you all from all over the world. Please, like I said, please write your names and just say hi and where you are in the chat box. All of you can access the chat box. Wonderful to see you. And then hi Berta, she needs special mention because she was also working with this. Great to see you here, Berta. And then we'll start soon. Somehow, before we start officially, just to say, this is a webinar format, so you can see the panelists. We can't see you. Any interactions that you would want with us, you can do that in the chat box. I'll keep an eye on that. If there's any questions and answers, we'll have a 10-minute session in the afternoon, just 10 minutes before closing, and you can post any questions in the Q&A box. There are too many participants for me to find your questions in the chat box, so please use the Q&A box for that. And we'll have sufficient time afterwards to have some Q&As. So I think we'll start. So to honor everyone's time and commitment to this space, welcoming you to the official launch of the Routledge Handbook of Research Methods for Social-Ecological Systems. We are really excited to have you with us, and it's a wonderful day, and we're really glad to be sharing this with you. I'll start by just introducing Professor Wesley, the co-director of the Center for Sustainability Transitions in Stellenbosch in South Africa, who's been also at the head of coordinating this book and project from many different spaces and roles. So Wesley, please, the floor is yours, and thank you for also arranging this for us.
Thanks so much, Rika, and yes, welcome to everyone. It's wonderful to be celebrating this book in a worldwide launch that I think somehow became easier with COVID, and now we're all doing these kinds of things. But we had something like this in mind, I think, from the beginning. So I'm just going to start by introducing a little bit about the book together with the other editors, and then we're going to have a few reflections from some of the people that were involved in funding it, also from some of the other authors, and then from some of the students, and finally from Francis Wesley, who wrote a very beautiful foreword for us. Just to give a short kind of overview of the motivation of the book. Maya, you can go to the next slide. Cool. So the motivation for this book really came, I think, from many discussions at many different social ecological systems research centers around the world. I think particularly some of the big hubs related to the Stockholm Resilience Center and the Resilience Alliance. And I think there was really felt that there was a need for some kind of guide or handbook to provide some kind of entry point or guide to the different kinds of methods that one can use to study social ecological systems, particularly because the students and researchers entering this space often come from a wide diversity of backgrounds, and often they're either coming more from the natural sciences or more from the social sciences, and it's quite difficult for them perhaps to have access or know about some of the methods from some other spaces that they might be able to use in their research. So that was really the motivation and is the goal of this handbook. Next slide. So I think, like many other books, this was quite a journey, a long journey in which also many different things happened in, I think, many of our personal lives as well. But as I mentioned, this book comes from many discussions in many different spaces. But the specific idea for the book, kind of much as it eventually turned out, emerged at winter school of the Southern African Program on Ecosystem Change and Society, which we held here in South Africa in 2014. But as I said, it built on many other discussions that we'd been having in many different spaces. And once we had that idea, we kind of tested it and discussed it with a lot of different people. Again, especially a lot of people at the Stockholm Resilience Center were very instrumental, but also the International Program for Ecosystem Change and Society. We also had various engagements at different conferences. And in order to get the book going, we originally actually started with 2 background papers that we realized we needed some kind of conceptual foundation in order to tackle this project, which I think everyone recognized as extremely ambitious. And so we actually spent several years just doing this kind of background work. And we only finally managed to have our plan straight enough that we were able to then approach quite a wide set of authors. And eventually we had, I think, 97 authors from 16 different countries to help co-author the different chapters in the book. And I think what is also super exciting, and we'll be hearing from the Resilient Waters Project a little bit later, is that they sponsored the open access of the electronic version, which I think is quite amazing and really makes it available, especially in the developing world, to a lot more researchers and students. But there were many different funders involved in funding various aspects of this project, workshops, and people's time. Next slide. So just my last slide is just to give a brief overview of the structure of the handbook. Basically, it's got 3 parts. Part 2 is the core of the book, which is the 28 different chapters talking about different clusters of methods, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But we also, I think in the end, did, I think, a pretty nice job on the introduction to kind of situate this research. So although our initial focus was really on the methods, we then did quite a bit of thinking about how do we also introduce different students and researchers entering the space into kind of an introduction to what are social ecological systems and social ecological systems research. And then I think a really nice contribution is really to talk more deeply about the profound implications of taking a complexity-based approach to study social ecological systems and what that means for research methods. And then we've got the 3rd chapter is quite a practical chapter on how to design and conduct SES research. And then finally, we've got a short chapter that describes how to use the handbook. Then we've got all the different methods chapters, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the coming slides. But then at the end, we also conclude with, I think, also quite an exciting synthesis on the gaps and challenges and emerging directions for SES research methods in the future. So with that, I'll hand over to Rika.
Thank you. Yeah. So what is unique about this book? Why now a book on, that's different about social ecological systems? I think it's one of the first books that actually tries to capture the field of research, and maybe by doing so also providing some kind of landmark or go-to resource for students entering into this field. So there's so many papers. We found that this SES research is actually, it's been coming together and emerging from different disciplines, and people using a lot of papers and publications to access knowledge and to teach with. So we hoped that this book will be some kind of, it's one resource where students can go to and researchers and get some kind of overview of what this field is about and what are the different methodologies that also inform this and clarify this field. I think, but what for us, it was really important to use a complexity or systems-based approach for defining and also for choosing the methodologies that we have in this book. So for us, a deep assumption from where we started and that guided all our interactions and decisions we had to make about what to include, what not, and how, was to say, well, this notion of the kind of intertwined nature of complex social ecological systems. So for us, it was really important that every method and every aspect of our engagement and how we present the material also reflects this intertwined nature of social and ecological systems. So we were also really focused on how can this book then explain what does this mean for how we do research. And I think in a sense also how we presented each chapter, we wanted to reflect, this could be some kind of way in which we can address this intertwinedness. We used some features of, I think it's really important to, or unique in the way that we try to bring about what are specific SES kind of features when we start looking at them from this intertwined perspective, and how could each method differently address different features of social ecological systems. So I think all the chapters have a focus on the relevance of its methodologies to address systemic features and interactions of intertwined social ecological systems. Maya, next slide, please. And you'll see that we've drawn on previous work that really, that confirms and that sort of also in unique and new ways reflect and demonstrate this intertwinedness. We drew on the expertise within our own circles and in our own networks. And I think these papers that bring this to the fore in the last number of years deeply influenced our understanding of how to grapple with this emergent outcomes then also that this intertwinedness features. So the work of Maya and colleagues from the Stockholm Resilience Center and others, Mike, you're also here, really influenced our thinking and I would say the starting assumptions of this book. Next slide. Yeah, and you'll also see that in the cover. So we hope that the book cover, which we commissioned a local artist from Rhodes University, we wanted something to portray this, this intertwinedness of social ecological systems and the dynamic interactions. And Dylan McGarry, who's also a researcher at Rhodes University, helped us in visualizing this dream we had of being able to give people also kind of a visual sense of how we can think and reflect and reimagine this notion of social ecological intertwinedness. So that's also something that's we're really proud of and really grateful for. Okay, next slide. Thank you. We'll hand over to Dr. Alta de Vos, who's a senior lecturer at Rhodes University. And Alta has been the big driver behind how we selected all these methods.
Thanks, Rika. Yeah, so it was quite a task to decide which methods to actually include this in the book. And that links very much to what Wendy spoke about earlier in this kind of the background work that we did. Next slide. So, as Wendy mentioned, we did these two papers, one a more kind of conceptual piece, and then this other paper where we kind of reviewed the existing literature on social ecological systems going up to about 2015, because this is how long it took us to do this work. So in that review, we reviewed the abstracts of over 4,000 papers. And just pulled out whatever methods we could find mentioned in those abstracts related to social ecological systems. Of course, there were limitations to this approach, and there were many methods that were not even mentioned. Even so, we came up with over 300 individual methods, even after quite heavy pruning. And of course, it would be impossible to review or write a chapter about each of those 300 methods. And so what we had to do is we had to kind of categorize those methods into groups of methods that were similar. Sometimes they were kind of similar in their philosophy. Other times they were just kind of similar in what they were attempting to do. For example, the ecological field methods were all methods related to collecting ecological field data. So we had 27 categories in the paper, and in compiling those categories, we had a first go at it as authors of this paper, but we also had some workshop at the Stockholm Resilience Center with other experts to come up with these categories. And then sort of after the paper, as we started to move along the process of doing the handbook, as the editorial team with some outside help, we made further modification to these groups, losing some categories. And then we also decided to highlight some individual methods that are used quite extensively in social ecological systems research. So an example of that would be network analysis. There are only about 3 of those in the handbook. Most of the methods that are covered in groups, and sometimes quite broad groups. such as, all the spatial methods. Next slide. So here are all the methods that are in the book, and Haley's going to talk about how they're kind of structured in the book a little bit more. But just to say that we then took these groups that we decided upon, and we categorized them further into these different functions of the method. So we had methods for data generation and system scoping, methods for knowledge co-production and affecting system change, methods for analyzing system components. We divided that into 3 different types: system components and linkages, system dynamics, and then methods for analyzing systems that directly inform decision making. So with that, I will hand over to Haley.
Yeah, so Dr. Haley Clements, one of our fellow editors, she's a researcher at the CST in Stellenbosch. Thank you, Haley.
Thanks, Rika. So as Onsi mentioned when she introduced the book, the real core of the book are these 28 methods chapters that describe each of the groups of methods that Alter has just shown you on the last slide. And these chapters were authored by one or several authors, amounting to close on 100 authors in total from around the world that hold expertise in these various methods. So we're extremely grateful to them for their contributions, which hopefully make this a really useful set of descriptions of these different methods. And then we also tried to make the chapters in this section of the book follow quite the same structure to make the book easy to navigate for people trying to look across different methods and learn about them and their similarities and differences and what they're good for. So this is just the structure of each of those chapters in the core of the book. So in the beginning, it's just a list of what methods there are in that chapter, if there's more than one. And then each chapter has the summary table, which you can see here on the right. And as Rika mentioned, we also spend quite a bit of time thinking about, well, what are the systemic features of SES that certain methods are trying to capture, different types of features, as well as alerting readers to, well, what are the different disciplinary backgrounds that these methods come from, which can potentially hold a range of assumptions, etc. And then also the types of research approaches, etc., that these methods are commonly used for. So each of the authors flagged the characteristics of these methods, which are, of course, many methods can do many things, but these are what they're particularly good at doing. Other thing to flag is that in each chapter we make connections to other chapters in the book, because of course in SES research, in many instances, you'll be using more than one method to answer a research question. And then the chapters also give examples of the types of questions that are commonly answered with these kinds of methods in the book. Rika, can you press next slide, please? Or Maya, sorry. Thanks. So this is a table, which is in each of these chapters, which just gives a summary of the different methods that are described in that chapter, as well as key readings and examples of those methods being applied to an SES case, should the reader want to go and learn more. Next slide, please. And then this just shows these different connections between the methods as well. So this is in the first part of the book, but just to alert people to the ways in which methods perhaps feed into each other in terms of being complementary, or one being a tool to analyze data collected using another, etc. And next slide, please. And then, because for each of the chapters we'd asked the authors to flag what the attributes of the methods in that chapter are, what they're particularly good at. This also enabled us to summarize this information at the start of the book. So for example, if someone knows that they're particularly interested in methods using a research approach that, for example, is collaborative, they can easily go and see which methods are particularly good at that. Next slide, please. and the same for the SES features and processes. So for example, if you're particularly interested in power relations, you can see from this table which methods are go-to methods for exploring power relations in a social ecological system. And then with this information, which is also a wealth of knowledge from the authors of these chapters, we could also then pull out interesting patterns or trends across chapters and methods, which enabled us to reflect on those in the final chapter. So I will now hand over to Maya to talk through that final chapter.
Thank you, Haley. Yeah, Professor Maya Schluter, co-editor, is from Stockholm Resilience Center. And yeah, Maya's insights also been extremely helpful in leading this last chapter. Maya.
Thanks, Rika. So we try to synthesize kind of this diversity of methods and portrayed in those methods, chapters, and groups, and kind of came to some more overarching kind of insights. There's many methods actually already available in SAST research that support stakeholder engagement and knowledge co-production. So many methods to support policy and action, but less in the kind of classic sense of optimization or prediction, but much more reflecting kind of a complexity perspective. There's also, I think, a lot of acknowledgement of the need for reflectivity and reflexive approaches, but less methods to actually support, or tools to support reflexivity. There's many methods that explore present and future SES at local scales, less that do so at the global scale. There's a majority of methods that are used to study interactions within one scale, but there's fewer methods that really enable to look at across scales. And this is where multi-method and mixed method approaches come in, for example. There's many methods that look at structure, less methods for studying the dynamics, such as path dependency or adaptive dynamics. And there's also a few methods that overcome the human nature dichotomy, since methods are often grounded and come out of a certain discipline or kind of perspective. There also emerged kind of a whole range of common challenges raised across the methods that are often grounded in kind of studying social ecological systems that are complex, adaptive, and intertwined systems. Then having that nature, the difficulties of defining system boundaries, right? They're radically open. What is inside, what is outside is difficult to decide. But those decisions have consequences and we need to be transparent about them. How do we deal with disciplinary biases and how do we account for diversity of views? How methods deal different with context sensitivity, right? Or what is relevant in context, what not, to what extent are humans embedded in social or ecological environments? How do we deal with power relations, both in how we apply a method, but also how we study social ecological systems? How do we deal with complex causation, right? That how do we untangle or deal with entangled cause and effect that are really not linear? So some of the method gaps I already highlighted, but they also point to some frontiers, and there's quite exciting and active research on those. For example, to study emergence, to work with case study narratives, or to combine network analysis with agent-based modeling. Or the cross-scale that I mentioned before, kind of using GIS mapping or multi-methods to be able to look across and at different scales. Or experiential methods or ritual practices or immersive practices, or also the idea of the need for new notions to actually be able to study the systems as social ecologically intertwined systems. And I think the SAST field is very advanced in knowledge co-production and reflexive research processes, but there's also frontiers on bringing more experiential and arts-based methods, for example, into the field. Methods for synthesis and theory building that, for example, deal with context dependence, think about middle range theories. The whole field of big data, machine learning, and virtual reality is, of course, also coming more and more in the SAST field, and multi and mixed methods approaches. So kind of to conclude a bit, kind of this learning journey and the book itself, this kind of SAST research really has pioneered new ways of doing research, and we kind of try to also show that a little bit through the book. It really draws on a very diverse set of approaches and methods. And we hope that the book really helps SES researchers to navigate this diversity and the emerging SES field and give some entry points to explore it themselves further. And by really trying to go beyond, just compiling some methods, but really clarify what each method can do and where it comes from. Oops. So SES research is really not so much the lone genius sitting in his, somewhere in his study or in his office, but rather it's an inherently collaborative and integrative endeavor, and a very exciting one. And with that, I hand over.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Maya. Yeah, next up is co-editor Dr. Christy Masajewski. She's regional director for Panthera, South and East Africa. Christian, you'll reflect a little bit upon the use for this book for practitioners.
Thank you, Rika. So yeah, who will use this book? I mean, who is the audience? Well, this handbook we've been working on is obviously largely aimed at researchers, for students, undergraduates and postgraduates, especially working in social ecological systems. But it's also a really great tool for lecturers and teachers to be teaching social ecological systems. I know, during our discussions as editors, co-editors, we keep saying that we wish we had that book when we were teaching and also when we were doing research in this field. So I really hope it'll really help in the academic world. But this handbook won't only stop at the academia. I think it'll also really help with the development and implementation of policy. I think this book will also be very useful for decision makers and stakeholders in many different fields. For example, if you're developing a management plan of an area or looking at natural resource management, it kind of shows the different methods that can be used when dealing with social and ecological system. So it's also really dealing with real world situations and on the ground. So development organizations will also find this book as a useful tool, as well as many NGOs grappling with complex problems in real world, facing real-time situations. So we really hope that this book will have a much bigger footprint than what we anticipated in the beginning, and because it really is very useful to all. And very exciting, you can go to the next slide, is that we will be launching a website really soon. And on this website, it will have a lot of different information about social ecological systems, and also the open access version of the handbook, which we Unsi mentioned earlier, which was very kindly sponsored by USAID-funded Resilient Audits Program, which Alanda will present on to you later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that was all the editors, and you can see, yeah, just the broad network and resources that came together in this process from everyone involved was really amazing and a wonderful journey to be a part of. Next up, we have Dr. Oderilwe Selomane, who's the director of the Future Earth Program on Ecosystem Change and Society. He's also based at CST in South Africa, and he would like to just offer also a reflection on, what kind of value or use this book could have for practitioners in this field or researchers in his project. Odie.
Thanks, Rika, and very nice to see some familiar faces. I'm really excited about this book, and it's very nice to see it out. It's been a long process that I've not particularly been involved in myself, but I've seen at least the beginning of this. It is also to point that I haven't got a copy, so I've been very jealous of all the pictures that I've been seeing on social media with people showing off their copies. But one thing I just wanted to say is that this book has really brought, from the PAC's perspective, it's brought a lot of the community together to work on this, to develop the book. And it's, as people have already pointed out, I think it's going to be a really huge resource to use both for teachers and students. And maybe the one side story that I think it's interesting about the book, or the one side story that I want to highlight, is that back in 2014, we had a winter school here in South Africa. We brought mainly early career researchers who were really trying to figure out how to be in this space, how to engage with the social ecological system space. And it was very difficult because whereas some of us were lucky to be working already in departments and places that were receptive of this way of thinking, a lot of people were really struggling. And one really big message that came out of that winter school was that we really need a book on methods, because people were finding that they were very, very struggling to find where to turn to for methods if your department is not really dealing with this sorts of things. And so in a way, this is, for me, I always think about it as a sort of a virtual department where you get to learn about methods from everyone who's part of this community. So it's really, really excellent. But another thing that it's highlighting is also that as a lot of the people who were part of that winter school calling for these methods ended up being some of the people contributing to writing them, which is also really fun to see. So yeah, from that perspective, I think it's really a journey of multiple processes, both of the field coming into some solid thing that people can recognize and think about, because the methods really define the field. So once we have the field, people can start to think about how to engage with it a bit more concretely and how to, as a new person coming into the field, to know where to start. And so from that perspective, I think it's a massive resource that's going to be very, very exciting. And thank you to all who contributed to this. And I'll hand it back over to you, Rika. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Odi, for also for that reflection. Our next speaker, and we will reflect on this and ask you to unmute already, is Mrs. Rolanda Bata. She's the Chief of Party of the USAID program on called Resilience Water Program. And proud, the wonderful, the sponsor of this book. And thank you for also joining us and for your support this far, Rolanda. I'm just going to ask you to unmute, please. I can't press that button. There you go.
Yes, thank you very much, and for having me here and to provide this opportunity. Resilient Waters is really proud and very happy to have contributed to this development of this such useful handbook. We also hear that this field is quite new on the sustainability science, and we also acknowledge that it is a pressing need to have a comprehensive handbook that provides a guide as to how socio-ecological systems should be understood, assessed, and managed for purposes of improving the resilience of our ecosystems and their livelihoods. Really, three aspects motivate us to support this such wonderful initiative. One was that having a handbook that helped the region to better understand, respond, and adapt to the natural and anthropogenic shock and disturbances. It's one aspect. Second aspect is that a handbook that surely contributes to one of key, or allow us to deliver one of our key outcome area in our program, which is robust information systems for decision support. And the third point is that having a group of talented women, from which the majority are from Southern Africa, and this, and also the fact that this book has been developed for younger professionals, and the prediction even outside of academy, it was a real deal breaker. This motivated us that, without doubt, we were contributed for such event in the world. We are really very proud of the quality of this book, which I understood is one of its kind. I also wanted to highlight one aspect, two aspects actually. One, first, that the book, by being intentionally targeted students, researchers, and practitioners at all levels, is a real key for us. Most importantly, we were very happy and proud that this handbook with this quality is published as open access through the support of USAID Resilient Waters. And we not only support the access through the open access, but also we supported one of the key reviewers of this handbook. So making this handbook open access, we trust that will increase the impact and the reach. And given that affordability and accessibility sometimes it is a challenge, we hope that this will break that barrier. We will also hope that the knowledge brought by this handbook will be taken and applied at all necessary levels. As program, I would like to reiterate that we will continue support to widely disseminate this fantastic book within our networks or even outside our networks. Finally, we really want to thank you so much, CST, to being a very good partner as we implemented this Resilient Waters program, and also for managing the training and research that offers to our young professionals and the research who are the future leaders of and custodians of our precious natural resources, an opportunity to do so. Truly believe that this intentional focus on tools, methods can help us move towards a resilient and equitable future. So, ladies, congratulations once more, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Over to you, Rika.
Thank you very much, Orlando. It's wonderful to hear, your perspective on that, and the support you've given us has been amazing and really mind-blowing. Thank you very much. Breaking barriers to getting access, exactly. Next up is some reflections from fellow co-authors and lead authors from some of the chapters, and hand over to Professor Michael Schoon, who's joining us from the School of Sustainability in Arizona State University and the USA.
Thanks, Rika. Thanks, everyone. I just want to start by saying I'm honored to be here with you all today, and I was honored to be a part of the book. It's always fun to work with clear and decisive leaders and guides as we went through this process together. Speaking with on behalf of my co-authors for our chapter on institutional analysis, we just really enjoyed going back to kind of our roots and thinking through what we enjoyed doing and what we, the references that we were drawing on as we were going through our training in this methods, digging into old references. And then the hard part was, of course, trying to hold to the limits and thinking about how do we bound this in a way that can be a good introduction to the subject. The book overall, it's just such a lovely outcome. I'm excited to use this with my students. I think this is a great benefit, as others have said already, to grad students, to practitioners. I think it's also useful for people that are interested in exploring new areas and expanding their own backgrounds. So I look forward to using it in that way as well. I was really amazed at the high caliber, the experts on these various fields that you've brought together. I truly am honored to be a part of this group, because I think the contributors to this volume are just fantastic. Such an amazing group of SES scholars. And I'll just end by saying I'm super excited to see that this is open access too. I think that's in and of itself, such an important contribution. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Also joining us is Professor Shiona Shackleton. She's the Deputy Director of the African Climate and Development Initiative at the University of Cape Town, South Africa.
Thank you, Rika, and thank you to you and the editors for this opportunity to share some insights on this wonderful book. Like Michael said, it really is a privilege for me to do this, as it was to be one of the many authors contributing to the book. All I can say really is that this truly is a fabulous resource for all of us working in the SES and I think the broader sustainability space. It provides an easily accessible and digestible starting point. And quite a number of years back, we used this term one-stop shop a lot. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the one-stop shop. It's like your little petrol station store. So for me, it really is a one-stop shop to explore a wide range of methods to combine and employ when working at the interface of people, society, and nature, with many useful examples to engage with. And I think the examples are really a key feature of this book. So this is in no small way due to the editor's careful containment of our often overly enthusiastic writing. I think they struggle to keep us down to our page numbers, but also gently nudging us into a standard way of presenting across all the chapters. So what you get is a very professional product at the end. They were perfectionists. At times you thought, oh no, the chapter back yet again. And once you said I could be tease a little bit if I needed to. As stated in a recent Nature climate change paper on the powers of qualitative research, a mixed method strategy is necessary to answer the complex questions related to climate and society. Researchers should be open-minded to different approaches and focus on the questions that need to be answered. And I feel that this book has been structured and presented in a way that can really help us do this. For example, the chapter on philosophical foundations of knowledge development is critical if we are to work across disciplines, but also outside of academia as well. The chapter on practice and design is extremely helpful for understanding how to plan and select appropriate methods for our research. And then there's the very useful practical chapter on how to use the handbook. It's clear that much thought went into making this book an accessible, practical, and informative guide. It literally holds your hand as you go through it. So well done, editors, on making it so user-friendly, and I'm sure there'll be many a grateful student that will recognize that. My use of the book so far, well, for a while, was it 3 years, Unsi, or was it more? I used a version of chapter 7, and I think every year I used a different version on interviews and surveys in my teaching and in a series of summer schools that we hosted at ACDI. This year, the online version actually was published just after the summer school, and we knew it was coming out. And thank you again, Orlando, for making that possible. And I invited Alta to come and give a talk. And I know all the students, there were 20 early career researchers all working on transdisciplinary climate change adaptation projects who now have the book in their hands, thanks to that open access. And Alta gave a wonderful talk and really sold the book at the meeting, at the summer school. So yeah, just very well done, editorial team, and the impressive list of authors from around the world for this incredibly valuable contribution. I don't know all of you, but I know a lot of you, and I'm actually so proud of what you've achieved. And I can see it becoming a classical go-to book for many a scholar and teacher, and it will be one I will definitely be recommending. And maybe it'll be one of those classics that you have edition 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 over the years. So go on, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiona. That was really lovely to reflect once again on the many iterations that reached people back and forth and just the process involved. Thank you so much. Yeah, and we also have with us Professor Sarah Gurgle, who's Professor and Associate Dean of Diversity and Inclusion at the Department of Forest and Conservation Sciences, University of British Columbia here in Canada. Sarah.
Thank you so much. And I also want to reiterate the big congratulations to all the editors. As a book editor myself, I know it's like herding cats, really, to get a volume that is so amazingly diverse, but also has some similarities among the chapters, which really foster student learning so that each chapter isn't set up completely different. So I know it's a hard process to get through, so congratulations to all of you for doing that. And it's been a real privilege and as well as a joy to work on the contribution on our chapter for this. So speaking from my co-author's perspective as well, it was really exciting. And I just want to say a few words about the importance of this book as a mentor. So as a mentor of young scientists, whether it's in the classroom or in research, I just want to acknowledge the importance of this book for answering that question of where do I start? So as a young scholar, when you're figuring out what you want to do, it can be one of the most exciting times of your life, but it also can be really quite overwhelming. And I think this book kind of addresses that issue of where do I start without getting overwhelmed? And I think often starting with the peer-reviewed literature is just too, sometimes it can be really ineffective because there's a lot of assumed knowledge and assumed background knowledge, and especially with methods. It's just, the peer-reviewed literature is often not always the best place to start in thinking about methods. So I think this serves a really important role. And I think for all the contributors, as has been said before, we each bring our own expertise to the book. And so the book really represents a much broader range of expertise than any one of us could possibly have written about on our own. So it's going to make us better mentors, better supervisors, because instead of necessarily launching our students in the direction that we would go because of our background and our expertise, we can actually share with them a really wide range of starting points that I think is not overwhelming. And I think that's really exciting. And I think that this book will help a lot of us be better mentors and better supervisors of the next generation. And I think that's something that came through with speaking as a contributor, that came through when we were working on our chapter, but I also heard that a lot from other contributors about how excited they were to share their knowledge to new students beyond their own lab group and basically mentor the next generation in a way that none of us could do single-handedly. So it really was sort of a collective labor of love for mentoring the next generation. So that was exciting to be part of, and congratulations to the other contributors, but also to the editors for bringing this incredible task to fruition, because I know how much work it is, and it was a fantastic experience. So well done.
Thank you, Sarah, for your reflection on that. Yes, mentorship, that's a really amazing perspective. And speaking of mentorship, we have with us also today 3 students. So usually the proof should be in the pudding, and we have the 3 students with us on various different levels to maybe just give a very short reflection also on their encounter with the book. First up, we have Amanda Magnani from the Center for Sustainability Transitions in Stellenbosch, and she's doing a PhD. Amanda, would you proceed, please? Just unmute.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rika. So much has been said about how important this is to us students, newcomers into the field of SCS research. I mean, I would call it a Bible if I could, because it just gives you that, that introduction that I didn't have when I sort of came into the space, but now you have somewhere where it actually written what is SCS research, and then you can just delve in there and then find all different parts of the literature and so forth. I have to speak to that. When I came to the space, it felt as if it's the people at the CST or it's the people at Rhodes University only who are in this space. But now being part of this process as a co-author and as a student at CST, I'm blown, my mind is blown out, because I've learned that there is so many people working in this space using applying social ecological systems knowledge in so different scales, systems, those who are in policy, those who are in academia, and so forth. So it's been an honor, and it's been so exciting to just have this platform as a student. I mean, to work with and lean on some of the leading scholars in SCS. So it's already given me that boost of confidence, like, okay, I'm here now. So yeah, speaking for those who attended the 2014 SA PECs, who had the dream for this to be fulfilled or to have this space, then I mean, I'm speaking for those now 6 or 7 years later to say, well, I'm here and this book is providing exactly what you were dreaming for. So yeah, thank you so much. And I'm just super excited. Over to you, Rika.
Thanks, Amanda. And then we also have joining us Kinga Pshuk from the Stockholm Resilience Center, who's doing her master's degree there.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us students to share our experiences with the book. Well, in my reflection, I will have to go back to the methods categorization that we heard of from Alta just before. So I used the book during my internship at SRC, where together with my colleague, we tried to map the method landscape at SRC to understand what features and processes of socio-ecological system we study and how we study those processes. So with our first attempt, we quickly realized that to investigate this and later analyze this in a meaningful way, we need to somehow group methods. And of course, there are many ways to nest methods. And as we heard before, it's not an easy task. And that's exactly where the book came along. So we decided to use the method categorization from the book because it grouped the method based on their purposes. And for myself and my colleague, as a newbies of socio-ecological system research, it felt just very natural, as often the purpose is what we have in mind when we try to look for tools that will guide our research further on. And so, and also the book contrasts the method with specific features and processes of socio-ecological system, and exploring those connections was a primary focus of our internship. So for that reason, the book also largely inspired the way we design our survey, the way we ask questions to the researchers about the methods, and how they use those methods to study SES features and processes. So thank you to all the authors and editors for giving us this guiding tool in our research journey further on.
Thank you very much, Kinga. We also have with us Sisaki Loshongwe from Routledge University, who is an honors student and has had encounter with this book as well. Sisaki, welcome.
Thank you, Rika. Hi, everyone. I was fortunate enough to be exposed to the Handbook of Research Methods for Social-Ecological Systems in the first term of this year when we had a foundation module. I'll shared the part of the book with us, the first part, which focused on what social ecological systems are and what social ecological research is. And since it was actually my first time ever hearing about social ecological research and doing research on my own, it helped me to view my research topic in an interconnected way, and just to understand that my research questions and my research problems need to be viewed in a resilient thinking approach in order to come to a conclusion more efficiently, and also to understand my problems in a holistic way, my research problems in a holistic way, since all the factors that contribute to those problems are most likely interdependent. I also used the book to help me write the methods section of my proposal, which I struggled with a bit since I didn't know where to start or what methods to use. But the book had the methods in these little subsections and sections, and they were explained well, so it was easy for me to just navigate my way around them and pick which methods to use. And I was also able to learn about new methods, which hopefully I could use in future research that I would do. And overall, I'd say that it's a great book, especially for a research beginner like I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really heartfelt and heartwarming to hear from you, Sisaki. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you very much so far for all the contributors. We have our conclusion in front of us, and for that we have closing reflections from Professor Francis Wesley, Professor of Social Innovation, based at University of Waterloo, Ontario. Thank you very much, Francis, for joining us also today and for being willing to offer the closing reflections here.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I have to say, the energy that has been generated in the past 50 minutes is just, I think, a small taste of what the excitement must have been in trying to put this together. And I want to congratulate you all for this. It's way overdue. It couldn't be more timely. You know, I remember 50 years ago, a long time ago, when I was in graduate school, and I was just starting graduate school, I remember someone explained to me, you know, the quantum mechanics idea that even physical objects were affected by the researcher actually looking at those objects. And in social science, this was a really foreign idea, and it just blew me away. And I remember thinking, well, it was only in kind of qualitative methods that notion of an observer interacting with the phenomena was even entertained. Everything else, you were outside. But I found it so fascinating that I followed it along, and this is long before anyone even knew about complexity theory in the social sciences, certainly. And so by the time I reached complexity theory, I thought, well, here it is. Here's the theory that's based on this. But you know, the methods, unlike in other disciplines, the methods lagged really far behind. So it was just unclear, you know, how you could look at a complex phenomena that was constantly changing. It was changing even more because you were there, and answer the wide range of both empirical and explanatory questions that people were trying to bring to it. And so, you know, every research group that I was in, it was like feeling your way along a foggy road. You know, everybody had to kind of come to an agreement about how we were going to go about this. In the best groups, you know, people struggled for the kind of integration that is so apparent in this book. In the worst ones, everybody just decided to split up and do their own thing and stick it back together again without any interaction between it. And everyone was dissatisfied with knowing that this precisely missed the complexity of the problem, because it was obviously in the relationship between these things. I came up to feel, but again, this was just tacit knowledge, that this had to be a journey. You know, we had to think of it as increasing contextualization, where no matter what you did, the phenomena changed before your eyes, and you had to adopt different kinds of methods for different kinds of questions and at different temporal points in the research. And yet, again, this was not reflected anywhere in what would be a canonical set of ideas about research papers. So finally, it's here. And I'm not surprised it's coming from this group, who, as far as I'm concerned, contain, you know, the lead thinkers in complexity at this point. But I have to say, you've gone further than I ever thought you would, because I thought, you know, you'd find all these methods, you'd put them together in the wonderful ways you do, but you really pushed harder to find ways to integrate this for practitioners, for students, for researchers, to sort of be able to push against each other. And I can't tell you what a difference that's going to make to teaching, but also to the research itself, because now there is a resource where people can sit down and look at this and say, where are we in this journey? What do we do next? And how can we be guided by the kind of understandings, the negatives and positives of these different methods as we pursue this particular journey? So this is a wonderful and timely intervention. I absolutely believe there will be a 4th, 5th, 6th edition. This will be a classic. I'm really proud of you all for doing this, and thank you very much for including me.
Thank you so much, Francis. It's just wonderful to, for everyone also, but especially to remember why we set out to do this, exactly because of those reasons and the experience that you've mentioned. So we've come to an end of our presentation, and we made it right within 1 hour. We have some time for questions and answers. If there are any of you who'd like to raise questions, please feel free to do that. Otherwise, I think we're also just looking at the time. I know that there are some in-person celebrations going to happen at some of the venues, ONC in Stellenbosch and the Resilience Center. And I'm sure that some of us will meet up on this side of the world soon. But thank you very much and I think maybe Rhodes will have something, but yeah, thanking you all for your time this far and for joining us. It was wonderful just to connect with all of you in this way. And I hope I'm sure the book will also give us further opportunity to connect and collaborate on this. Nothing set in stone so far, but I think there'll be some future opportunity to collaborate and share. And also the website will be another opportunity for ongoing changes, interactions, and elaborations on this. And we hope that this will be also a living document, not that it will gather dust somewhere, but that we can engage with it and adapt and recreate as we all grow on this journey. So thank you very much for that. Unsi, are you all done? You ready for action on your side?
Celebrations that have been going on behind the scenes already.
Wonderful. Great.
But yeah, no, thanks so much to everyone for all the authors for their contributions. It was quite a long journey, as Shiona said, with many rounds and thinking. And I think also a big thank you to all the editors. I think it was also a long journey for us, but I think it was really fun, and we all learned a ton from this. I think we all have a much better sense of what the landscape of methods is ourselves. And then thank you to everyone who joined today to celebrate with us in true kind of online worldwide style. So that was wonderful. So enjoy your evening, and yeah, thanks so much.
Great. We'll close now, and just a reminder that we'll be following up with everyone who engaged. We'll be sending you some links and flyers, discounts. So you'll find another email from us reaching you soon. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely day wherever you are.
Thank you, and thanks for all your contributions to the event.